Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of the year of iText. And it's a special one. It's together with Boris Dubov from Duolab, our expert, Michael, who you see there, and Boris. They have been working on ngPDF, the new technology, new generation PDF, and they'll explain today what it means, and they will also show the ngPDF technology with iText. Can you go to the next slide, Michael? Yeah, you can also skip the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, I will hand it over immediately to Michael, but a few practical items. So we will be recording. We are actually already recording this webinar, and it will be available on YouTube via our website. Afterwards, we'll also share a webinar, an email actually with the link to the recording, also with a link to the white paper that Boris, Michael, and the team wrote on ngPDF, so you can read the contents in a white paper. At the end of this webinar, there's a 5-minute Q&A, so don't hesitate to enter questions for Boris or Michael in the questions tab or in the chat tab. My colleague Madeline and I are available to have a look at your questions and then to share them with Boris and Michael. If we don't have sufficient time, then I can guarantee you that Michael and Boris will be responding to your questions afterwards. It can take a day before we get back to you. You can also share on social that you're attending this webinar. Just simply use hashtag iText. And that's it from my end. I'll come back at the end for the Q&A. Michael, I'm handing it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Corinne. So hi, everyone. My name is Michael Debay, as Corinne already mentioned, of course. So I'm the research manager at iText. Me and my team are responsible for innovation and standardization within the company. iText is two things, basically. iText is a open source library, both written in Java and .NET, made available since early 2000, and it allows you to create and manipulate PDF files more easily. Creation can happen through API method calls or through more convenient methods like HTML to PDF or through the use of iText ditto templates. iText, besides that, is also a company that's been around for about 10 years, give or take. And it's ever since it's been a leading technology company and active in the digital document space. We have lots of users, millions of users. I was a user of iText before I was an employee. And we have open source and commercial users at the same time. We have a dual licensing model. So we offer an open source license and a commercial license for those who don't want to adhere to the rules of, or are unable to follow the rules of the AGPL. Major sectors that we target are financial, governmental, health. As you can clearly deduce from these, they're more document-driven than other sectors. So the product, the library, has been around for about 20 years now. Let me just turn on my highlighter. So the product has been around for 20 years now. One of the more intrinsic changes that we've done over the years is moving to a more company-friendly license back in 2009. That's about when the company also started. That has allowed us to build a few, as we call them, add-ons, but you can also call them plugins, on top of the open source core that we have. In 2016, we released iText 7, right here, and we have made use of that release to refactor the code base to make it more manageable, maintainable from our end, but also more user-friendly from your end. Next to that, we've added a lot of functionality on top of that through the use of more add-ons. One of the more interesting ones is, for instance, PDF Calligraph, which allows you to use more exotic features of non-Western scripts, for instance. Most of you will be more familiar with the Latin-based scripts that we use daily in English and Dutch, my own native language. But the more exotic languages, for instance, Arabic or Thai or Indian languages, they use more interesting typographical features than we have available, and PDF Calligraph will enable you in that one. Another interesting one on this slide is PDF HTML, which is our more popular one, which converts HTML to PDF. It's a single-use functionality tool, but it allows you for a lot of configuration, customizability. And then the most recent releases from last year are PDF Render, which will render PDF files to images, and PDF OCR, which will apply OCR technology onto scanned images, allowing you to have searchable PDF files. So in the PDF space, both iText and Duolab are active in the ISO and the PDF Association. ISO is the organization that manages the PDF standards, PDF Core, PDF UAA, and the other ones. And Boris and myself and other people within iText sit on the ISO committees. So we have been working together in that regard for quite a while now. Next to that, we have the PDF Association, which stands for promotion of the PDF standards, but also releases a few technical standards. Promotional wise, they organize stuff like the PDF days, which both iText and Duolab frequently visit. The technical standards that they release, one of them is ngPDF, and this is something that we'll talk about today. I will now give the floor, or better put, the screen to Boris Dubrov, and he will explain a bit more about ngPDF and concepts. Boris, take it away, please.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction, and I'll continue. So first of all, a few words about me, myself, and our company. So I'm a director of Duolab, and we are a company specializing in software development services, especially very active in PDF technologies, and we are a long-term partner of iText. So I've been working with PDF for like 20 years, and I started as a software developer. So I'm a developer by the nature. And as Michael already explained, we are very active both at the numerous technical working groups of PDF Association and at the activities of International Standardization Organization while discussing future PDF standards. So in this particular webinar, we'll be speaking about the standard and the activity under the roof of PDF Association. So I'll be very soon showing you what ngPDF is, but the key functionality it implements and demos actually. This is a demo application. It implements an algorithm for converting so-called tagged PDFs into HTML, and as well as managing all kinds of properties of the semantic tree in a given PDF document. This algorithm was developed by PDF Association, and the primary goal is to unify the way how PDF is represented in open web standards, primarily HTML5 CSS. Internally, ngPDF is based on iText technology, so everything inside, like a core backend, is all implemented on iText framework, iText library, iText PDF SDK. So this includes parsing tagged PDFs, dealing with whatever PDF modifications the tool does, and also, of course, implementing the algorithm itself. But you would probably want to see what it is. So many of you probably have seen the website ngpdf.com, and feel free to navigate there. And this is a very basic demo of the tool itself. So it accepts some PDF documents. The PDF documents have to be tagged. So they should contain already so-called semantic tree, otherwise the tool will not accept them. And if your document is like that, then you can immediately convert it to HTML or open actually an HTML presentation and the PDF presentation side by side. It's surprisingly, well, actually not surprisingly, because the sample document is chosen in such a way that HTML and PDF presentations look very similar. And you can scroll through the things and in a synchronized manner. So on the right, you see the original PDF. On the left is an HTML file. You can, and further on in the left pane, you can hide it or open. You see the semantic tree I was mentioning before with all the structure elements. This resembles a bit HTML, but in fact, it's not HTML. This is a PDF and a tree, a semantic tree of so-called PDF tags embedded into PDF. And so going back to the presentation, what we have here, is, so I mentioned already, so it's very important that some PDF documents do contain semantics, some of them not. Those that contain are called tagged PDFs, and normally you don't see it. So if you open a PDF document in a normal viewer, you wouldn't be able to understand whether your PDF document is tagged. So ngPDF or iText tools will show it later. Other tools, for example, you can use to understand whether the semantic is preserved or not. And actually, if you pick up a random PDF document on the web, very small probability it will be tagged. You need to do some special effort to make sure that your authoring or creation software preserves the semantic information, stores it in the PDF document. Well, actually, many many common Office and desktop applications do know how to do this, although normally it's a separate option not enabled by default. And this tagged structure, semantic tree, plays a crucial role in accessibility. In fact, when a screen reader tries to voice the given PDF document, especially to a disabled person, it reads just the semantic tree. It ignores everything else, ignores all other visual aspects of PDF document. It just navigates through the tree and voices it over to a user. So every minor detail turns out to be extremely important, like language, alternative text for images, correct identification of all the semantic elements, etc. There is a dedicated ISO standard called PDF UA1 that addresses how to make sure that all these minor things are done in a correct manner, and so that the AT is able to provide the best user experience for a disabled person. So what ngPDF does, it actually turns this invisible semantics into visible HTML or visible semantic tree. So it's actually an excellent tool for evaluating at a single glance the quality of PDF tagging. So if HTML comes as rubbish out of a tagged PDF, this means that something is not good in your semantic tree of the original PDF. So to give you some advanced demo, I can go back to the tool and show, for example, so on the left you see tags. So these are tags like tables consist of rows, you have headers, and you can actually navigate through the things by clicking to both PDF or HTML elements, whatever. And this thing below demos how derivation algorithm actually works. For example, if I click to contents, originally in PDF, this is a caption tag, and inside actually a table of contents. Well, HTML doesn't support this exact property, so derivation algorithm says that this kind of caption has to be turned into a paragraph. So it's a little bit of loss of semantics, but still a very predictable algorithm. And you have lots of other properties here. So you have structure, alternative text. I have some images here. So if you have an image it will have alternative text you normally don't see. And some other more advanced stuff like classes, attributes, like layout attribute here, saying where exactly the image is placed on the page. So ngPDF might be used to just give you a visual representation of this internals of the tagged PDF. In addition, it allows you to embed a CSS inside your PDF document. And this CSS will be preserved inside the document itself. So it's not kept in a database or somewhere else. It's just inside your PDF, and adjust your presentation. And the very, very simple examples, I'm adding some more CSS declarations. For example, I want my header to be a bit bigger, and I want my caption to change color to match the colors of all other headings. So I apply this here, and yes, you see immediately how CSS has changed. And if I go and download this PDF will keep this original or this updated CSS you can use for further on for some processing. So to go back to the presentation, It is, yeah, I have to stop here and return my screen to Michael, who will be speaking on further topics around tagged PDF and iText things. So back to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Boris. So yeah, to pick up on tagged PDF and accessibility, I think the main distinction to make as well is that accessibility and tagged PDF aren't necessarily the same thing. Accessible PDFs do require a PDF to be tagged, but tagged PDFs aren't necessarily an accessible PDF. How to tag your PDF files is something that I will dive into in a few moments, but the PDF Association has released a best practices guide some time ago. It's available on their website, pdfa.org, so feel free to read it after the call, after this talk, not during, of course, but feel free to read it. As for iText, iText supports tagged PDF out of the box. That we have in iText Core, we have auto tagging available, which we'll look at in a few seconds. HTML to PDF also supports tagging, and we've recently added support of PDF UA in iText Ditto. You can try out iText Ditto on ditto.online and check it out for yourself how this works. One of the main issues, or one of the main challenges with tagged PDF and accessibility in general, is to check or to verify whether or not the PDF is correctly tagged. Taking a very simple use case of a table inside a PDF file, the table spans 3 pages, and it's a single table, and it's tagged as a single table, but if you want to know in an automated way if it's one table or not, there are some issues that appear already. It could be that the table is mistagged. It should have been 3 tables across 3 pages, or it should have been 2 tables across 3 pages. So it's hard to do that automatically. ngPDF is a very nice tool to check that really quick. As Boris showed you, you just drag and drop a file, and out comes an HTML file. And if you can see that the HTML is already different in a structure kind of way from the structure that you expect from the tagged PDF file, then something is up. So that is a very easy way to check whether or not the tagged PDF is correctly tagged, at least on a very superficial level initially. There needs to be a more thorough investigation, of course. So generating tagged PDF files for end users, if you generate a single PDF file, then you're going to use authoring software like the Office suites that are out there, like the Microsoft Office suite or the LibreOffice, the Open Office ones that you have. They have exporting to PDF, PDF UA, and other PDF standards options. With iText, we have a few options available out of the box. But first, I want to introduce you to a tool that I use on a daily basis. It is called iText RUPS. RUPS is an acronym, or a backronym actually, that stands for Reading and Updating PDF Syntax. It is a freely available tool which is available through our GitHub repo. So we have a repo iText, organization iText to put it better, and you can just search for RUPS here. Then you'll find 2 results. One is the deprecated iText 5 RUPS, then you have the iText 7 RUPS. So feel free to check that out, download it, and inspect some PDF files. So what we'll do here is we'll generate a PDF file using the high-level API. In iText, we made a distinction between a high-level and a low-level, where the high-level is the more intuitive API for the developer who isn't familiar with PDF syntax. It uses familiar constructs like paragraphs and tables, which you add to a document, compared to using the low-level API, where you would need to know how to write PDF syntax and how to integrate that all together. So that's something that Boris and I would be familiar with doing, but for the more PDF non-inclined, that's not the way to go. So I always urge people to use the high-level API. And this is an example of a high-level API code sample. So I just walk you through it real quick. So you create a PDF document that you want to write to a certain file. Then we instantiate a document object, which is the entry point to the high-level API. To this document, we will start adding high-level objects like a paragraph or a table in this case. The table has 3 cells. If you were to use a low-level API, you would have to start calculating how big the table should be on the page, if table cells should be split, and that's not even mentioning table spanning pages. So using the high-level API is almost always preferred. So if you run this code, you will get the following result. I will pop to RUBS real quick. Okay, I will run it, yes. Okay, and I have a non-tagged PDF file that I want to show you. Let's open it up in Viewer first. So as you can see, it's visually very simple, just a paragraph and 3 cells in a table, easy. RUBS has a few components that are very interesting, but the ones that we're looking at right now is on the top right, which is the structure tab. This contains the 3 that Boris was talking about earlier. This is the tagging structure of the PDF file. And there is no tagging information available in this PDF file. The PDF file doesn't know which content it holds. It just displays text and in this case, a few line operations. So what can we do to make this a bit more attractive, a bit more tagging worthy, let's say? iText already has the concept available here of paragraphs and tables, which will then be easily translated to the tagging structure. So all we need to do is add a single line, PDF document.setTagged. That's all you need to do when using the high-level API. If you use the low-level API, then you would need to do a lot more, too much to go into details here. But it is doable if you know what you're doing, but please use the high-level API if you can, which will result in the following. Let me open RUBS again, and then let me move the tagged PDF into RUBS. And as you can see now, when clicking the structure tab, there is structure available within the document. So we have a document tag, which will be the root of the document, obviously. And then we have 2 elements available, the paragraph tab and the tag and the table tag. As you can see, this does represent the same content as we have just seen. And visually, the PDF file is just the same, but structurally and semantically, it's a whole different world. And this PDF file is now ready to be used within ngPDF. It's not going to produce a lot of interesting results because it's a very simple PDF file, but it is a tagged PDF file nonetheless. So I am approaching our time limit, so I will move to the Q&A slide. We will take your questions in the questions tab. If there are more questions than we can handle in the short time that we have available now, we will get to you in the next coming days. So feel free to ask questions. But before we do move to the questions, there is one more thing I want to mention. After the presentation, today or tomorrow or whenever, marketing is going to send out a email with this link. This link is the white paper that we've worked on, the white paper concerning ngPDF. So Boris has written a part of it. I have written some paragraphs for it, as well as has the team both in Belarus and in Belgium. So feel free to read that, and thank you for listening, and we'll take questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Boris and Michael, for this deep dive, short deep dive into ngPDF with iText. We indeed received a few questions. I see we still have 5 minutes left, so everyone, please submit any questions. Now's the time. You can ask Boris and Michael straight away. Let me perhaps pick this one here from Mick. Michael, Mick is asking, from when on will ngPDF be available to use?
You mean from within iText, of course, because the specification itself has been released. I don't know the exact date, but it has been released for quite some while now. But we are looking. We have code available within iText, and we are looking to open source it in the coming few months or so. So we are releasing something to use. So the code that Boris has used in the so the website that Boris used uses a library in the backend, and that backend library will be released.
Okay,
just probably to say that as a website and the demo application, feel free to do whatever experiments with it. As of now, it's freely available. It doesn't store any user data at all. It helps you to play with your tagged PDFs whenever you want.
Exactly, and that's ngpdf.com.
Okay. We'll make sure there's a link also in the email, actually, which goes out after this webinar. David is asking another question, an interesting question. Will the ISO pick up ngPDF as a specification, or will PDF Association keep on managing this? Boris, I don't know if you want to take this one.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I think that this standard is going to stay within PDF Association. It started as a project within PDF Association. It was also a group of people that deals with ISO technical discussions on PDF, and technical working groups in PDF Association are probably the same, but officially this is a PDF Association work, and PDF Association has recently adopted a new publishing policy, IP policy, so it'll probably be under IP of PDF Association.
Okay, so I hope that answers David's question. So PDF Association. Another question, Jeff is asking, what about interactive forms and PDFs after you have converted them to HTML? What happens with that? So what about interactivity in forms and PDFs after you have converted them to HTML? What happens with that? Michael, you want to go?
I think maybe Boris is better.
Yeah, I'll take this question. Yeah,
Okay.
so this question is certainly addressed in the derivation algorithm itself, but on the level of the static level, let's say it like that. So the forms are turned into PDF interactive forms and turned into HTML interactive forms. But the one thing that is lost on the way is, of course, any JavaScript logic, because JavaScript is completely different in the PDF model and in the HTML model. I can mention, well, there are some works around this, but for the moment, ngPDF doesn't support any JavaScript conversion. So you'll see the forms, but you will lose whatever validation capabilities, maybe highlighting stuff, data copying that might be present in interactive PDF forms.
Okay. I see more questions coming in. Thank you, everyone. Alfred is asking, how will the HTML version of DIN A4-paged PDFs deal with non-DIN A4 screen sizes? So how will the HTML version of DIN A4-paged PDFs deal with non-DIN A4 screen sizes?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understand the question here, but HTML that comes out of PDF. So normally, when you probably speak here about different media here, and depending on the media, HTML might use different CSS. So I was showing that one can embed any CSS and global properties of CSS, document level CSS, into a PDF, and this CSS will be inside the derived HTML. So potentially you can use full power of CSS your browser supports to make derived HTML flexible as you wish with regard to your media, responsive as you wish in terms of HTML world.
Okay.
And that's a big advantage.
Yeah, Alfred, if this doesn't answer your question, just send us a message, and we can connect you with Boris and Michael to make sure they answer what you're after. Mohan is asking, what is the licensing mode for this? So I think, Michael, you already clarified a bit.
Yeah, so right now we haven't fully released it yet. You've got ngPDF.com, which you can freely use. But we're still in the progress of making the repo that we've got open source, which does come with a few things that you need to take into account, which coincidentally I do talk about tomorrow at a conference. So maybe if there's still tickets available, you can join that talk as well. But yeah, right now the licensing model isn't public yet. What we're going to do with it, but we're going to make it open source. What we've got.
Yeah, so open source AGPL. We
Most likely, yeah.
actually have finished the 30 minutes, but I see a few more questions. So if Boris and Michael, if you don't mind, we can take a few more questions. There are two people, Jamil and Stephen, are asking about digital signatures. If ngPDF renders the digital signatures, and how is it represented with tag, and what is the impact?
Well, I can probably answer that. That's a very interesting question. Because digital signatures is yet another layer. So PDF is very complex technology. It has not just semantic tree or visual presentation, but also digital signatures, bookmarks, maybe some other stuff inside. So digital signatures, so a visual part of digital signatures will certainly be converted into HTML. But there is a big question, what does it mean to digitally sign an HTML page? So if your PDF has some visual appearance of the digital signature, it will show up in HTML. But that's virtually it for the moment. That's a big discussion actually, what to do with digital signatures and how to make sure that the users who see derived HTML understand that originally PDF was signed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but it's out of the scope of the derivation algorithm itself, just to be clear.
Yeah, the complexity is because PDF has this whole digital signatures functionality embedded into the file system, into the file format, and if you transform that, you change the signature basically. You cannot just take the signature as is and put it in the HTML because there's no way to verify it from within the HTML.
Okay, so complex, not yet possible. Not yet possible. Let's put it at that then.
Let's keep it at complex.
Out of the scope of the derivation algorithm itself. So it's my question on the wrapper application. So like ngPDF as a web application could potentially show a message that the original PDF is signed, but the algorithm itself or an SDK that turns PDF to HTML essentially doesn't deal with digital signature.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's a higher level question actually.
Okay, yeah, thank you for touching on digital signing. Few questions from Satish. Is ngPDF available as a JavaScript library to render PDFs in web? And then he's also asking, what is the best JavaScript library to render PDFs in web browsers? Who wants to take that question?
The best JavaScript library to render PDF files in the browser is one that connects to the backend where we run PDF render based on iText. So no. But no, the ngPDF technology is based on iText technology, so it is a Java-based library. Not a JavaScript, but a Java-based.
Yeah, and just probably to add that iText SDK is available on both Java and .NET platforms on back, so it's normally used on backend. So if you want to implement the derivation algorithm on the front end using JavaScript, then well, you would go and for another SDK which is fully JavaScript based. One of the obvious choices would be an open source PDF.js library, but it doesn't support any well, it doesn't support derivation algorithm, just plain.
Yeah, I think I would just use the approach that ngPDF does. So just make a call to the backend, which runs the ngPDF code or which runs the iText code, and then sends the HTML that comes out back to the front end.
Satish, if you need more information on that, feel free as well to reach out to us afterwards. Mohan is asking, for what languages is this available as a library?
I assume you mean programming languages. So that's
yes, Java, Node,
yeah,
and so
it's
on.
basically an extension of what we just answered. So it's available on the JVM. So any language that leverages the JVM can use this one.
Okay. Wong is asking, is is there support InDesign? Does it support InDesign? I believe that is the question.
So probably the question is whether InDesign can generate tagged PDFs, and then the answer is yes, sure.
The answer is positive. The answer is yes. Okay, that was easy. Andrew is asking, will you have some C# examples on how to create an ngPDF and output the HTML?
So use C# to create to use ngPDF, you mean?
So the question is, will you have some C# examples on how to create a PDF, an ngPDF, and output the HTML?
So that's a question I can't really answer right now, but I think part of the question is, can you generate? Do we have iText Sharp or iText for .NET samples that create tag PDF files? That's what I partially read into that question, and the answer is yes. The source code is very similar to the Java source code, almost an exact copy, aside from some peculiarities as how to rewrite .NET versus Java code.
Okay.
That's for the second part of the question. I can't answer it right now.
Yeah, here again, Andrew, if this doesn't answer your question, contact us with some more information on your question, and we'll answer it gladly. We've got another question, Sam from Toronto. Hi, Sam. He was wondering if there is a possibility to search and replace text in a PDF with our API without changing the document formatting. So I repeat again. Is there a possibility to search and replace text in a PDF with our API without changing the document formatting?
That searching and replacing a PDF is always a very, what's the word, delicate issue, depending on how the PDF was generated. So we do have a very similar functionality, and for instance, PDF sweep, which allows you to search for words based on regular expressions or just direct text search, and then you can redact out the information. But the issue is that in itself, PDF doesn't really have the concepts of reflow easily available. So there's a lot of things that come looking with it. So it's a very delicate issue, I think, at least on a programmatic level, as with iText.
Okay, here again, I would say, Sam, reach out to us, and we can go into more detail with our experts for your question. I see John is asking whether he can reach out to us about iText functionality, specifically how to combine several PDF documents into a single PDF. For sure, we can get you in touch with our experts, I would say, then in the next few days for that. A few more questions on ngPDF. Wong is asking, how about comment on PDF? Is that also supported? Comments on
That's
PDF?
again another interesting question. And again, this is a limitation in HTML. So HTML5, just a standard HTML, doesn't have a notion of annotations so far. I know W3C works on this. And as soon as they come up with a reasonable model, reasonable draft documentation on how annotations should be represented in HTML standard, we'd be gladly implementing and adding this functionality to ngPDF.
Okay, and then yeah, two more questions, and I think then we have covered all the questions. And Sam is actually saying thank you. I think we answered his question. So Joy Joe is asking, can ngPDF convert HTML back to PDF, or do you need to use HTML to PDF tool for that? So can ngPDF convert HTML back to the PDF, or do you need to use an HTML to PDF tool for that?
So, well, Michael, it's a question to you.
Yeah, so no, ngPDF is an implementation of the derivation algorithm, as Boris already mentioned. So it's basically a one-way street operation tool. So you go from PDF to HTML, tag PDF to HTML. If you want to go back to PDF, you would use pf HTML. Let me just grab my slide deck and move to this slide again. So PDF HTML is a tool that we've released in the past, 2017, so it's right here. This is a single functionality tool, so you just provide it with HTML, CSS, and then it converts it to PDF files, excuse me. There's a lot of customizing that you can do. You can add your own custom tags or interpret tags differently depending on what you want to do. But I would use this tool for that.
Okay. Jojo, reach out to us if you want more information on that. And then a last question from Mohan as well. Do we have performance benchmarking information for ngPDF?
No. I'll start there. Well, first of all, when we deal with PDFs and PDF processing, the benchmarking is a very difficult question because you don't have standard ways to measure the complexity of PDFs. And I should say that the number of pages has nothing to do with the complexity of a PDF document. You might have 1,000-page documents processed within a few seconds, and one-page PDF that would be processed for ages because it has so complex data structures inside. So from this point of view, but on the other hand, feel free to just experiment. If you have your own test files and would want to understand how fast is in ngPDF, go and try this yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. We've covered all of the questions actually. If anyone has any further questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can send it to the marketing email address at itextmarketing@itextpdf.com, and we'll pass on your questions to our experts and to Boris, who will get back to you in the next few days. Boris and Michael, I think the only thing I need to say is thank you for your time and for the clarity on ngPDF and then showing how the technology works. So thank you, and everyone else, we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to us.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.